Thank you very much for joining us for the latest installment in the Hoover Institution's Project on China's Global Shark Tower Speaker Series. Today, our speaker is Professor Suisheng Zhao, who joins us from the University of Denver. He's a professor and director of the Center for China-U.S. Cooperation at the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies. He's the founder and editor of one of the top journals in the field, the Journal of Contemporary China, and the author and editor of more than 24 books, including his latest, which is The Dragon Roars Back: Transformational Leaders and Dynamics of Chinese Foreign Policy, which was published by Stanford University Press last year. He joins us again, having been a former Campbell National Fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he received his PhD degree in political science from the University of California at San Diego. Today, he's going to be talking to us about Xi Jinping's power concentration and the foreign policy implications after the 20th Party Congress. Suisheng, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Glenn, and thank Larry, thanks Hoover and China Shark Tower Project for having me here back how many years before last time here, National Fellow 1998, so we are really getting old now. The topic is Xi Jinping's power concentration and the implications for China's foreign policy after the 20th Party Congress. Arguably, I would say that Xi Jinping reached the peak of his power during the 20th Party's Congress and became the most powerful leader since the founding of PRC. I would even argue more powerful than Mao Zedong in terms of institutional power, institutional authority, because Mao is back and forth, the first front, second front. He is what I saw that he eliminated his potential factional rivals and filled his confidant in the Politburo and the Politburo standing meeting based upon their personal loyalty and ideological line rather than merits. He's running the country at this time, and if we cannot identify credible rivals, which I think has upset long-standing practice of internal power balance at the top leadership. Mao Zedong was balanced, for example, by his revolutionary comrades, Deng Xiaoping, you saw some other people. Deng Xiaoping was balanced by Chen Yun and other elders. And Jiang Zemin was balanced by Deng Xiaoping and Hu Jintao by Jiang Zemin, who is now balancing Xi. I really don't see. I cannot identify, maybe they are, but we cannot see at this time. And also the decision-making process has been transformed from so-called consensus building model to a Xi in command model, just like Mao in command model we talked about early years PRC. He is now positioned to rule China, at least for the next 10 years, if not his lifetime. So now the questions are how Xi has reached this position of institutional power, I would say that, and what are the foreign policy implications of his power concentration. Now, because I've published this book, so I want to mention this book. This book developed what I call the leadership-centered framework to trace the rise of China and also dynamics of Chinese foreign policy. It argues that leaders matter in all political systems, but matter more in totalitarian and authoritarian systems. Elect leaders in democracies like the US are constrained by optional parties, by public opinions, by term limits. Authoritarian leaders in the PRC one-party system, which emphasize hierarchy and discipline, they are relatively unchecked by public opinions. And there's no optional party. And very often, those most powerful leaders have held offices of power lifetime. The PRC has been ruled by 8 what they call paramount leaders since the founding of PRC. But not every top leader has been able to chart a new course for China's foreign policy or China's direction. So that's a puzzle. To answer this puzzle, my book distinguished Chinese leaders, these 8 leaders, into 3 types. One type is what I call transformational leaders. They are game changers. They have new visions. And also they have political wisdoms to navigate the jungle of the PRC power politics. And in that case, prevail their visions to chart new directions for Chinese foreign policy. In fact, for overall direction of China. Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and Xi Jinping are transformational leaders, each chart a new course for China. And in Chinese official terms, Mao made China to stand up, then get China rich, and Xi Jinping is now getting China strong. That's what the Chinese terms. The second type, what I call transactional leaders, they have managed to maintain in power, but they stay on course set by their predecessors. Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao are typical transactional leaders. They survived 10 years each, but they all stayed on course set by Deng Xiaoping. The third type, what I call failed leaders, they lost powers in the jungle of power struggle in the PRC. And Hua Guofeng, Hu Yaobang, and Zhao Ziyang are typical failed leaders. They might have new visions, especially Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang, but who cares? They lost power. They cannot prevail their visions. And so this is my book's framework. And my book basically, what I call leadership-centered framework, try to document how these transformational leaders have their new visions. Here, this is the framework. Also, they have a personal office authority, and also they have tried to politically shape ideational environment. Here, what I talk historical memories and nationalist aspirations, and also they restructured and used political institutions, and also exploit external environment. Here, we're talking about global distribution of power and norms, roles, and institutions at global level. And now let's go back to Xi Jinping. Before we talk about Xi Jinping's power concentration and foreign policy implications, let's first start with foreign policy making organizational principles in China. Here there are 2. One is 党管外交, they call it leadership, CCP leadership over diplomacy. Every paramount leader has an official portfolio for foreign and national security policy making, for sure. The second principle here is political discipline. In fact, when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was established on November 18, 1949, Premier Zhou Enlai, famous to the Chinese first generation of diplomats that there's no small matters in diplomacy. And the Chinese diplomats were just like PLA in civilian clothes, subject to disciplines and self-disciplines and absolute compliance to the party policy. The second part I want to talk before we talk about Xi Jinping is a foreign policy making hierarchy. I see at top is paramount leaders, but 3 layers in the foreign policy making. At the top is the decision-making institutions. That's Central Committee, Politburo Standing Committee. And below these policy-making institutions are what the Chinese called 协调议事机构, that type of policy coordination and elaboration organizations. These opaque party organizations normally work behind the scenes to assist the top leaders on pressing issues in an interdepartmental manner. The third tier at the bottom here, you can see are line bureaucracies in the government, party, and military. Their primary functions are information gathering, policy implementation, and recommendations for the top leaders. And paramount leaders are at the very top and of the hierarchy. But they each has a different leadership style to work with the bureaucracy or work with these so-called coordination institutions. And Mao Zedong, what I put there, was a crusader. And he made strategic decisions on security issues and top down. And doesn't matter if there's bureaucratic resistance or not. He just pushed that through a Korean War, all those things you can see. And he dedicated his trust lieutenant Zhou Enlai to work with bureaucracies. Deng Xiaoping is a somehow kind of consensus builder. He dedicated his authorities to his proteges, Hu Yaobang, Zhao Ziyang, those people, and also to the bureaucrats. If they reach consensus, he automatically normally ratifies that. He steps in only if they cannot reach consensus. So that's what my former advisor, Susan Shirk's argument, delegation by consensus. And Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, they try to continue this consensus building process through what was so-called connective leadership process. Then Xi Jinping, he has re-centralized the policy-making authorities with what he called the 顶层设计, top-level design. And in fact, he has become a micromanager and chairman of everything. I just cannot understand how can he still sleep. He manages everything, even toilet, everything. He needs everything. You see, he wants just he centralized decision making on every aspect. Here we are talking about foreign policy. We'll go further. Then what have triggered Xi Jinping's power concentration or consolidation? I look at three triggers here that helped Xi Jinping to concentrate or centralize his power. One was the elites' complaints during that time, 2012, around that time. Hu Jintao was too weak. Hu Jintao's connective leadership and those kind of a factional makeup was too divisive and too weak to resist those liberal ideas, threatening the monopoly of the Communist Party. And the second trick was a series of high-profile political scandals and corruptions involving his potential rivals. We all know that Bo Xilai, Lin Jihua, Zhou Yongkang, those cases at that time was really timely for him. Third was the rising nationalist power, aspiration, and confidence among the Chinese people, and their frustration. On one hand, they were so kind of confident. China was rising after the Olympic Games in 28 and the financial crisis in the West countries. But in the meantime, Chinese people also, especially those elites, became frustrated because they found that the Western countries, the US, those countries still resisted China's rise, undermined China's rise. That's what they became frustrated causes. Xi Jinping, therefore, consolidate his power with the consent of the political elites at ruling elites. And also he used those scandals to centralize his power by purge those potential rivals and replace them with his trust loyals. And also Xi Jinping, in response to this environment, presented his new vision for China, so-called China Dream. In fact, days after he became the party general secretary, he gave that famous speech about China Dream, a great rejuvenation dream, which really matched the appetite of the many people for a strong leader. And the mode of the time, one of renewed what I call nationalism, confidence, and self-assertion. In the meantime, Xi Jinping restructured foreign policy making, the entire policy making process. I go too fast here. Xi Jinping centralized his power and decision-making institutions. These were at least that you don't have. I don't want go through them because he did so much institutional changes to change the power. What I want to concentrate is the foreign and the national decision-making institutional restructuring since Xi Jinping came to power. Here, you can see this top is paramount leader. Then we see those coordination institutions. Then we see the bureaucracies. What Xi Jinping did was to redo the coordination level of institutional setting and also bureaucracy here. At coordination, the central coordination institutional organizations for many years after 1981, the Central Foreign Affairs Leadership Small Group was the only standing foreign policy coordination organization, which in fact was founded by Mao Zedong in 1958, then disbanded during the Cultural Revolution, and Deng Xiaoping restored that in 1981. And but there were some other institutions built in 2020. They built a National Security Leadership Small Group, which came out of the embassy bombing 1999. We all knew at that time people were talking about China was lack of crisis management coordination institution. They should build like America's National Security Council, but they did National Security Leadership Small Group at that time. And then Hu Jintao, that was Jiang Zemin did. Hu Jintao had another one in 2010 during those maritime disputes with the South China Sea and Japan head up. There are so many institutions involved in the maritime. They call the interest preservation. So he built a protecting maritime rights interest group. But the problem of all those institutions were they did not have enough or regular staff support. In fact, they all rely upon one office called the Central Foreign Affairs Office, which is right. That one is a regular office, but all these are ad hoc meetings. But so in that case, they lack of the capacity or ability to help the central leadership to make regular policy analysis and recommendations. And so this handicapped China's national security and foreign policy making. And Xi Jinping came to office, he realized that. And the first thing he did was to reorganize the whole structure. The most important new institution, other than all those kind of small leadership groups reorganization, the most important institutional innovation was the creation of the State Security Commission. At that time, people thought it's most for just like America National Security Council, but it's not. has a much broader power. Is in charge of both internal and external security. It's not only consultation and the coordination institution, it's also decision-making institution. Xi Jinping himself had that. Of course, Foreign Affairs small group also by Party General Secretary. But for him, this is his own child. So he made that a very powerful behind-the-scene institution. And national security leadership group was absorbed by that organization. And then in the process, this organization has shifted its focus from overall national security to internal security, more focused on the internal security. In that case, Xi Jinping upgraded the Foreign Affairs Leadership Group into the Foreign Affairs Commission. That's what we see Wang Yi last week. He went to Munich. His title was the Office Director of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission. That's his title, Office Director. But it's very powerful organization on the foreign affairs. And also Xi Jinping convened Central Foreign Affairs World Conferences much more often. Yeah, before him, only 4 times. The first 5 years, he convened 2. He also called back all those ambassadors, Chinese top diplomats to Beijing to listen to his speeches much more often to make sure they follow his policy line. They know what's going on in his mind. Another thing Xi Jinping did was tightening control of foreign policy bureaucracies in the state party and the military. And for many years, starting from Deng Xiaoping's years, Chinese diplomats saw themselves primarily as professionals. They were at least try to become professionals and recognized as professionals. But this development produced what is interesting, paradoxical transformation of their political status, especially foreign ministry. The more professionalized the Chinese diplomats, the less important their political status. A senior diplomats hardly made it to the top level of political hierarchy. We knew for 20 years. The highest level they reached, the foreign minister retired, was state councilor. But before that was Politburo's prime vice premier, all those kind of important positions. So their political status declined. And while they became professionalized, Xi Jinping has reversed the trends. He advanced political status of Chinese diplomats and allocated more resources. 2028, we all know Yang Jiechi was promoted to the Politburo, and Wang Yi, sitting foreign minister, became state councilor. That big promotion for them and political status. But here, the price, you have political status, the price is that the emphasis is no longer on the professionalism, political loyalty to the party and to me. That becomes the top priority for the Chinese diplomats. And Xi Jinping also expanded the CCP party diplomacy here, the Central Propaganda Department, Central Liaison Department, and the Central United Front Department. They have given much more resources from behind the scene to the forefront to tell so-called China stories. They are military diplomacy has also been tightened. In fact, before Xi Jinping, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin somehow lost control of military diplomacy. So he not only has established so-called chairman responsibility system to control overall military, but also elevated military diplomacy. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense used to have a Foreign Affairs office. Now that office is upgraded, elevated to the Central Military Commission as the Office of International Military Cooperation. You go to China talking to those military conference, they all told you come CMC, Central Military Commission, not from the Ministry of Defense. That's also upgrade and also something to make them more under Xi Jinping's control. Xi Jinping's power concentration has very important foreign policy implications. The most important consequence is the change in the incentive structure of Chinese diplomats. They used to be professionals, so they followed professional norms. No longer. Now their incentives, they get promoted, they survive, they have to show political loyalty to the party and to Xi Jinping himself. So in that case, they have become enthusiastically to implement Xi Jinping's signature foreign policy. Here, what I call big power diplomacy in my book. And to support his new initiatives, such as Belt Road initiative, all those ridiculous, sometimes from outside, ridiculous initiatives. But most importantly here, their behavior change is that they have responded to Xi Jinping's call for fighting spirit, 斗争精神, Chinese said. So to have a baseline thinking, 底线思维, Chinese call that. So they have pursued so-called core national interests. What's core national interest? Defined as bottom line of national survival. You cannot negotiate. You cannot compromise. So they became wolf warriors. That's the context, institutional context of China's wolf warrior behavior. We all know Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For many years, they were criticized as no backbone. They received the council tablets. But now they cast themselves as a ministry of a wolf warrior ministry. The defender of Xi Jinping's policy. We can see the behavior change. Yang Jiechi and Wang Yi, we all know these two people. Under Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, they were so polite, courtesy. You met them, they were professionals. And Yang Jiechi, he spoke English. He was a little tiger, little Bush family. People thought this kind, you can work with them. No longer. I just wonder if they are same people now. They are not same people. They are same people, same faces, but they have totally different. I mean, the first meeting between Yang Jiechi, Wang Yi on one side, and Tony Blinken and the American side, and Alaska. These are same people. Yang Jiechi, you saw him sitting there. You can no longer talk to America. Could no longer talk to us from the position of strength. You cannot teach us of democracy. Your democracy in big trouble. And Wang Yi added, said no. And you have to change your bad behavior. 老毛病, old bad behavior. You have to change them. So these same people last week, you saw Wang Yi, the same person. People talk of China. I mean, after the COVID-0 failure, Xi Jinping wanted to work with the United States, but Wang Yi is in Munich. He not only not apologize for the violation of the balloon, but he accused America. You used the force to shut down our balloon. He is so kind of is what I just quote. Is unbelievable. That's his word. Almost hysterical. That's Wang Yi's word last week. And is abuse of force. That's what he said. Is that same person? I did not meet him many times, but only twice. That was many years ago. He was at that time. You sit with him. He's a smart guy, polite. And he wanted to learn about America at that time. But now he knew everything. He showed to his boss, He not only knew everything, he just stand up. So this is a behavior change from the structural institutional change. And another change of foreign policy implication I see, because this kind of assertive behavior, Xi Jinping has put his diplomats, put his military officers, and put the party workers. China has fast increasing pushback, backlash, and resistance from the US and other countries. So Xi Jinping has, in that context, has become increasingly, I would say, insecure. Insecurity is in his mind. And so he has elevated security to the level of development. Deng Xiaoping emphasized economic development. For him, economic development is still important, but security is more important. So he has a new term called 统筹发展, an integrated approach to development and security. And this new concept reflects his insecurity in his mind. In the 20th Party Congress report, you can see he dropped two very important key phases. One was peace and development, are the theme of the time, no longer there. The second was a period of important window of opportunity for China development, no longer there. So here, peace and development and economic development, for him, is no longer the most important things in his mind. So he has emphasized national security. And this national security is expressed in his own term called 总体国家观. I translate holistic national security outlook. You can people use the overall national security, comprehensive national security, basically try to have a host of national security threats. But here, what I see is most from this national security or external security has been through the lens of internal security, regime security. He has a term called political security. That's a code word for regime security. So in that case, we see all the laws passed by since he came 2024, especially Hong Kong national security law, all reflect this kind of security first, security, internal security linkage to external security approach to look at Chinese foreign policy. This emphasis on the security or elevation of security to the level of national economic development has very important foreign policy implications because that will increase his risk tolerance of the economic backlash, economic pushback, and he became more risk. Averse, leading to take more economic risk. So that's why last couple of months, people were talking about if Xi Jinping will soften his tone for the economic side. But I have not seen that. I don't think that could happen, at least in the near future, unless China's economy collapse, which I don't know if it could happen. So in conclusion, I think I talked too much already. Let me ask three questions here. First, is Xi Jinping big power diplomacy premature? Has China overreached? Has Xi Jinping made China's future increasingly uncertain? My answer to all three questions are positive, meaning yes. Why? Let me briefly on the last slide. Xi Jinping is not a shrewd strategist. He's not Mao Zedong. He was not as strategic as Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong tried to play the strategic games with the Soviet Union, the United States, really well to China's advantage. Xi Jinping has alienated all his possible, valuable partners and united his rivals. So that's what Xi Jinping's strategic position today. Second, Xi Jinping's policy has really made the Chinese economy in a big trouble. And what we talk to people in China now, the most most famous term is run away. Run in Chinese can run. You run away as fast as you can. That's what the Chinese elite, Chinese intellectuals. And the most importantly, to answer these kind of uncertainties is that the Xi Jinping administration has made Chinese foreign policy incoherent, irrational, and unpredictable. Xi Jinping does not have Mao Zedong charisma, although I say he is more powerful, but he does not have that kind of charisma. Why is powerful? His power is kind of coercive power, not his personal quality. He has the last 10 years, what he has accomplished really has not accomplished almost nothing. But he has accomplished using coercive power to establish fears among the Chinese people, among Chinese elites. So in that context, nobody dares to tell him truth or try to disagree with his policy. If whoever disagree with him, he said, you are arbitrarily commenting the central policy, 妄议中央, that's a new term he created. Then now becomes even more personal. He said, 恶意诋毁党和国家领导人, maliciously slandering party and state leaders. So he minimized the opportunity for any of his mistakes to be corrected. And so he has plunged the country into a vicious cycle. He will make mistakes. He made mistakes, zero COVID, and then open U-turn. Those have consequences, increase his fear. Then he will make more mistakes. Then eventually to get to some kind of the ventures of no return, including foreign policy adventure. And if he decided to attack Taiwan, I hope he will not in the future. And many people think he will not in the future. But if he did, because he just like Putin, he lives in a bubble. People thought he's irrational. I really think he's increasingly irrational. And if he made that decision, nobody can stop him. So that's why China has entered a very uncertain future. I don't know where China will go from here. Stop here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I know we have a very distinguished group of people in the room, so I'll start the discussion with only one question, and I encourage you all to line up your questions, and I'll take a roster, depending on which hands I see first. You rightly point out that Xi Jinping has become the chairman of everything. But of course, the chairman of everything, with that comes tremendous risk, right? By putting yourself in charge of everything, including the toilets, as you say, when there's plumbing problems, even minor problems, then there's no way to escape the culpability that comes with that. And you rightly point out, for example, that China's experiencing pushback on the foreign policy frontier. It's alienating even countries that were hedging between the United States and China, particularly look at the Philippines. Look at Europe in light of the war in Ukraine. There's an increase in insecurity as a result of this. Look at the demographic challenges China is facing down the road. The economy is slowing. And so I'm wondering if you could give your projection about how Xi Jinping has perhaps backed himself into a corner by making himself chairman of everything while all of these things are going wrong, and what you see ahead of us in light of that.
I don't think I can make any reliable prediction of Xi Jinping. That all we know is he's unpredictable now at this time. And indeed, I think he's, as you said, not only he is chairman of everything, in charge of too many things, make him crazy, but also he indeed made increasingly more mistakes. So from that perspective, he's coming to a corner at this time. In fact, I thought that last December was a corner. He came to the corner. I don't know how he can come out of that corner. In fact, I also thought that in the last 20 years, there are several watersheds in the Chinese politics. 2008, 2009 was a watershed, and 2012, Xi Jinping came to power was one. Then he came, all the change of Chinese political dynamics. Then 2022, last year, was another one, because that's why I argue that the 20th Party Congress was the peak of his power, and his power will come down from then on. Indeed, I think he has lost trust of the Chinese people. Not Chinese people, I'm not saying Chinese people, Chinese educated elites. Most people still don't know much about what's going on in the power politics and Chinese policy direction. But a lot of educated people have really lost their trust, including those what I call the little pinks, 小粉红, those young nationalists, and they suffered so much. So I thought they were lost the trust on Xi Jinping. But Xi Jinping has not backed off at all since last December. And in fact, he's doubled down his efforts. You can see what he did at his speech at the Central Party School last month. He still tried to promote so-called China's path of modernization. And first time he used the term 中国式现代化, the Chinese style modernization, and makes so clear contrast between the westernization and the China's path of modernization. In other words, China would never go to the Western path. And so he will push even further on his, what I think, disastrous path for China. So he came to the corner at this point. I think he already came to the corner, but he will not admit that. And so he will continue to push China to the cliff. I don't know if eventually China would collapse. That's what I don't know. But I think that's the direction he's pushing China toward.
I have a question. So, you mentioned that he emphasized more on security issue than economic issue. And also you mentioned he has been trying to institutionalize everything. So if we combine these two together, then we have an observation that he purged heavily within military and also within finance. So he purged lots of finance, top finance people. But how about foreign affairs? So I didn't know any important purge occurred in that area.
You're right.
What is the explanation? Why?
Because I went to China, talking to the Chinese colleagues, I found most open-minded are economists and the legal profession. And I don't know if I can say military in that category. Military is not that category. So his purge of legal profession and economic financial sectors are predictable. But his purge of military, not because of their liberal mind, because of their power. For him, this security apparatus, not only the military, but entire security apparatus, the Ministry of Public Security, Ministry of State Security. These are what he tried to control, and also he saw potential threat. So he purged those in those sectors and those people he thought could become a threat in those sectors for sure. As you say, financial, legal, economic, security apparatus. But foreign ministry is for quite a while, as I said, I will not say they are liberal, but they were professionals. and they did not do their job the way he hoped. But these people change so quickly, as I said, Yang Jiechi, these top people, Yang Jiechi and Wang Yi, these people, they change so quickly. And they also give them, I mean, you can see the budget of foreign ministry increased a lot. During COVID, that 2 years, little bit cut, but increased. And their political status increased. And they quickly became his, front soldiers. And so I don't think he needed in that case to purge them. Have used them really well. These people, I think, worth his trust. They did a good job for him.
Larry.
I have a comment and then a provocative question. The comment is that a lot, I don't think everything, but a lot of the scenario you've been describing, I think, has haunting parallels to Russia with the concentration of power of both foreign policy and the whole concept of political security and so on, increasingly in one man who's increasingly controlling, power aggrandizing, and so on. Moreover, I understand that a psychological portrait that's been done of Xi Jinping by a quite experienced psychological profiler delivers a very chilling portrait of an individual who is not only megalomaniacal, but truly clinically absolutely lacking in any trace of empathy, which means an immense capacity for cruelty and infliction of destruction on a large level. Who cares if he?
Who wrote this profile?
I can't say in this session. We'll talk later. But in any case, now the provocative question. Okay, as with Putin, there's an immense potential for miscalculation because he's in a bubble. He's not getting diverse information. It's self-selected and so on. But, you know, if you play this out, he's embarked on an extraordinarily intense pace of military modernization. It's expected to reach its culmination by 2027, maybe even sooner. Maybe then he will decide. It's really, if you extrapolate what you're saying, it's kind of likely that he will decide, if something doesn't change, to attack Taiwan in one way or another. And it could turn out like Ukraine and ultimately, I think, lead him to fall from power. But maybe it won't. Will the US intervene? We don't fully know. Will it intervene in time? Will it do what it needs to do to militarily modernize and forward deploy so that it can deter and repel a Chinese invasion? Will Japan come in a decisive way? Will Australia come in a decisive way? Will Taiwan summon the will to fight? All of these, it seems to me, are open-ended questions now. So yes, there's an element of irrationality to what he's doing, and potentially catastrophically so. But you could argue it's not that irrational if all you care about is conquest and power aggrandizement.
I agree with that. In fact, from his perspective, all his decisions, all actions are rational. Outside could see irrational, but his people, that's my sense in Chinese, in his inner circle, everybody is guessing what he thinks. Then tell him what they think he thinks. That's the way. Nobody will tell him at this kind of environment what he does not like. So every decision in that context he made is based upon the information he received, which from his perspective is rational. For example, on the Taiwan issue, as you mentioned, his people would have, if you decide to take Taiwan, nobody would be able to stop you. The United States cannot do it. although we're militarily, we prepare Plan B for U.S. involvement. But if we decisively, looking at the Chinese military, those stories, they said we can take Taiwan in a week. Just like Putin thought they could take Ukraine in a week. And they thought we could use all the missiles to destroy all those strategic military bases and totally destroy Taiwan's resistance capacities. That's what the military told him, although it's not the case. To take Taiwan, you cannot simply use missiles, you have to land the troops. But he would listen to his military officer, would definitely try to tell him what he wanted to hear. And in that context, if he made decision to take Taiwan, could be a disaster for China for sure. But from his perspective, no, it's not irrational. It's rational. We can win. We don't know. That's what now we say. In outside of his circle, it's indeed uncertain. So everything has two sides, positive and negative. So he heard only positive side, which is not wrong. It's also truth. So that's the decision-making mechanism in China, and also that's how dangerous it is, provocative.
Tom.
Thank you, Suisheng. My jumping off point is where you ended up on the characterization of China's foreign policy behavior as unpredictable, as chaotic, with which I agree inconsistent. And Larry's observation about Putin and Xi. I think it's fundamentally different. I fundamentally disagree with that.
That's good. We need controversy.
And it goes back to something you said early on, which I do agree with, that Xi's elevation was a consensus decision of the leadership, which put him in power to do certain things, predicated on the description that you give of the concern about outside, because outside interference could stir up the internal instability, which threatens the continued power of the party. But my experience in dealing with Chinese leaders in that system, these aren't a bunch of pansies. This is a tough system. To make it to the top, you're not going to roll over and play dead. And they're patriots. So you're opting out or copping out on the, it's unpredictable, I can't make a prediction. I think you've got to, because there's a logic to your analysis, and either the logic will turn out to be accurate or inaccurate, but you need a statement to know whether you're right or wrong here. And where that is if this is a consensual course of action, which he implements, and he made all those changes that you described to turn the organs and instruments in foreign affairs into transmission belts. These aren't decision-making. These aren't an analytical. These are not develop options. It's carry-out mechanism. I have difficulty seeing the rest of the top leadership of the party following Xi over the edge. The logic of what this is headed to disaster. The policy over the last, I would say, dozen years, certainly the last 3 years, has failed tremendously, internal and external. Continuing along the same course, because that's what Xi wants to do, I can't see him staying in power. I just can't see it. I don't know exactly how he's gonna, but if the choice is China goes in the toilet, or we stick with Xi Jinping because we're afraid he might purge him, he's expendable. Preserving the party leadership and China's place in the world. I think Trump, his personal aspiration. Therefore, where I'm going is what I think the implication of your analysis is that this chaotic situation is already being challenged within the top leadership. That explains part of we're going to re-engage with the Americans. We're not going to re-engage with the Americans in here. How much of it is relative power, persuasiveness of the argument? I think the economy is going to be the deciding factor here. That they've got to have a better international environment relationship to bolster the economy, to maintain stability. Just sort of go back to Deng Xiaoping kind of thing. I think the logic of the situation is very strong in that direction. And I think the others in the leadership will push that way. Whether she goes willingly or has to be removed, okay. But anyway, what's wrong with what I just said, extrapolating from your analysis?
I think you're absolutely right here. They should have internal divisions, but we don't know. That's the problem to understand Chinese elite politics. We don't know. We assume in this situation, some people will defect and will not be willing to see the Communist Party regime collapse. What he is the best destroyer of the Chinese Communist Party. From at least from outside, we can see that. And I think a lot of people inside China, they could see that too clearly. They are smart. Those people are, and those people, some of you look at Dom, just follow him. Yes, Mr. Yes, all those people. But that's what they performed. That's not the real them. The Chinese top leaders, even Wang Yi, I don't know if he believes what he talked about or everything he talked about. He's a smart person, but he has to perform the way he did. So the ultimate, as you said, I agree also with what you said, ultimate test is economy. Xi Jinping so far has not proposed workable economic recovery programs yet at this time. So Chinese economy could be in big trouble in his 5 years, next 5 years. If that happens, I think we'll see, as you said, he could be disposable, and some of his own people will come after him. But the problem here is that he has controlled so well over the security apparatus, the military, the coercive part of the system. So nobody could be successfully or easy is not easy, it's so difficult, much more difficult than more time even, to have a coup d'etat or to get rid of him. That's the problem today. These people perform because of fear, because they know they cannot successful. So that's what I'm concerned. If economy collapsed, we'll still have a similar situation. I don't know. I really don't know. It is such a mess in China in terms of the policy-making process, inconsistency, and it's a moving toward disaster. But how to stop that, we don't know. I really don't know. Internally, we don't know. We can only guess. Yeah.
I think Aaron.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I think things is a fascinating talk. I've admired your work for a long time, so I'm excited to read the new book. Congratulations on that. So I have a question about the integrated development and security concept that you mentioned. So in particular, you write that Xi has elevated security sort of to this co-equal status of development, but actually in some internal speeches, he's gone further than that. So in the leaked Xinjiang papers, he has one really interesting speech where he's talking to CCP members. And he says that the Baltic states are a really interesting example, right? So he said, particularly when you're thinking about trade-offs between development and security, this example shows that you can become quite developed and still break away from the Soviet Union, the historical example there. So what he took from that historical example is that it's really important to privilege security ahead of economic development. So my question for you is, how far do you think Xi is willing to go in taking that concept? I mean, you see domestically in China, his prioritizing, consolidating power over the tech sector, reindustrializing, or sort of, going back towards this sort of state management of the economy. So how far do you think he's willing to go in privileging both domestic security and also international security over China's economic development?
So here, I think you are definitely right here. If security and economic development are not in conflict, he will put them in parallel. And depending on the circumstances, he would just go, while emphasize security, still go with economic development. But if there's a conflict, the choice is security, definitely. He will sacrifice economic development for security. Here, when we say security, you are talking another concept here is internal security versus external security. And the internal security is also above external security. In fact, maybe put that way, he always see internal security in a linkage to external security. Xinjiang issue, Tibetan issue, Hong Kong issue. These are typical examples of linkage between internal security and external security. And he saw external threats from internal lens, then using internal instruments and ways to resist external threats. That's what his so-called dynamic between security and development. And how far he will go, I don't know. I would say how far he can go. He can go at this time. If economy, as Tom Finger talked about, economy is ultimate test. If economy is going to collapse at that point, what he will do? He might want to save economy. But I don't think he knows how to do that. That's the problem for him. I mean, Li Keqiang, I don't think Li Keqiang is a good, competent leader for sure. But he has a sense of economic responsibility, that his legacy, that's his job. But he wasn't allowed to do his job at all. That 10,000 people meeting to save economy, not even that front page of the People's Daily at all. And this last meeting, I mean, for next month, March, for the Lianghui, the National People's Congress, for Li Keqiang's 政府报告, the government report, he called that State Council meeting, only deputy ministers were there. Those ministers were not there at all. He tried to work on economy, and Xi Jinping did not really care. And also, I think what he tried, I mean, in the Central Economic Work Conference last, I think December. And that conference really did not produce anything new at all. So that's the problem for his, the balance between economy, between the development and security. So that's why I think China is really, I'm very pessimistic about China's future in that case.
So we have Paul and then Gopal.
Okay. Okay.
I guess small disagreement with Tom in the sense that I don't think it's kind of a principal issue whether you push for a more precise prediction or whether you look at some range of possibilities. And I think if you're making policy, you have to prepare for different possibilities. But on one point, I'm in strong agreement, and that is I think Xi Jinping has backed himself into two corners. One is the one that you described, but the other is the appearance of being emperor for life, the violation of the two-term rule, so to speak. And it certainly encourages more people to think about, well, maybe I could do the same thing. There's this marvelous soliloquy in King Richard IV, Shakespeare's play, Henry IV, Part 2, where he says, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. And he compares himself to a sailor on top of a mast in the middle of a storm who can go to sleep, and the poor king can't go to sleep because not because of the burdens of office, but because of, I think it's Lord Cumberland who got him in power and is now chasing him to get out of power. And it's an inevitable sort of thing. I know this is somewhat debatable, but to me, it's pretty clear the reason Mao started the Cultural Revolution was, in fact, all these people were beginning to say his time has come. He's mismanaged, and he got rid of Liu Shaoqi. You know that's better than I.
Yeah.
But most of the successors were gone.
In Bill, yeah, everyone, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's a huge dynamic in operation here, and just want to suggest a couple of sort of what do you call them, comparative politics examples. Of course, every country is different. Every historical time frame is different. I have to remember that. But it does seem to me that it's interesting that Stalin, who consolidated power as much as Xi Jinping and as ruthlessly and as much based entirely on fear and not on greed, because he didn't have money to pass out the way Xi Jinping has had. He couldn't make billionaires, but he could kill you. So that's pretty potent. He misjudged the American willingness to fight in Korea. After turning Kim Il-sung down for a year, he finally gave him the go-ahead. After basically the US did nothing in the communist takeover in China. But he had an insurance policy, which is if the Americans do intervene, Mao has to promise to take care of you because I'm not going to. So he got a double win. He almost took Korea, but he certainly put a 20-year block in US-China relations, which may have been his real goal. I don't know whether that indicates prudence, but he did become prudent after that. And certainly, to me, the parallels between Berlin and Taiwan are pretty striking. And in the case of, all these guys are different. I'm not trying to say that Xi Jinping will behave the way Stalin did. I sort of hope he will, because it seemed to me Stalin showed a great deal of prudence during his lifetime over Berlin, and then his successors largely over Berlin as well. And I think that's partly, in my view, it's because the US managed to be credible without a credible military option, credible about deterrence, and that's difficult. Anyway, sorry. So two other examples that are maybe worth thinking about. One is Saddam Hussein, who became arrogant after what he considered his victory over Iran. And after the end of the Cold War, thought he could grab Kuwait and miscalculated again, as Stalin did sort of about Korea. Miscalculated the American reaction, which it seems to me is a distinct possibility here with respect to Taiwan. And got his clock clean, as we would say in slang. But he managed through sheer fear and brutality to survive another 12 years until he was actually finally evicted by force. And then a third one, which I had some familiarity personally, was Suharto, which might be more interesting here, although the differences between Suharto and Xi Jinping are about this wide. I mean, Suharto was a dictator, but a pretty mild one by comparison. But his difficulties began sort of toward the end of my time there as ambassador, when there was a split between him and the military, which was a much more important elite institution than the government party. He purged the top general and anyone he thought was one of the top general's followers. The basic issue was these military guys were complaining about the corruption of Suharto's family. But it took 10 years for that. It's the 10 years that strikes me. You can have a split in the elite that eventually brought down Suharto in that case, but it took a world economic financial crisis. You say that Xi Jinping connects security and foreign policy. He ought to connect security and economic success, because it seems to me his downfall will really come if the economy comes grinding down, and that's a real possibility. Sorry, I've gone on too long, but it seems, where do I come out on all of this? It is that I think if I were in Washington trying to make policy, which I'm sort of glad I'm not, because this is a really hard one. And we've got one of the worst possible wars in history on the doorstep if it's done wrong. I would certainly be thinking as a deterrent about what our capability is to cut off energy supplies from the Persian Gulf, which ought to give Xi Jinping pause, and we're not thinking enough about that. But I would, in terms of longer term policy and what I think is a serious danger if he succeeds or his successor succeeds in making China the dominant global power by 2049, then we should be looking to try in any way we can to create splits between him and the party, not to try to undermine the party, which may be the longer term goal, but try to show the party that their survival actually is at risk by the way he's behaving. Sorry, that was sort of, do you agree is the question?
Did you want to reflect on that?
I think the party knows. I mean, his colleagues know what he's doing, the damage he's doing. But the issue here is that what they want to do, or if they can't do anything to stop him. That's the problem. It's at a separate party. And several points I think you mentioned that should be interesting. Now Xi Jinping has become one man leadership, one man decision making, and the whole system now has changed toward that direction. I talked to colleagues from China recently. I met several. I did not go to China now, but I met some people from China. For this book, I don't think I can go to China now. And they all told me in every level of the government, the 一把手, the number one person, all centralized, controlled all the decision making, all the resources, and become so corrupted. The corruption is so deep now in the Chinese system. So the whole system is in big trouble today because of he's at the top, one man decision-making process, and the whole system has been followed that direction. Second point I think you talked about is that this kind of policy-making process has doomed to fail for sure. Eventually, how to deal with you talk from American perspective, but you compare him with Stalin, Mao Zedong, those people. I think that's good comparison, because you said Mao's launched cultural revolution because there was resistance, and he tried to defend himself even at the expenses of the whole party and state operators, destroyed everything. And I think that might be also the result of Xi Jinping eventually he will do. If he discovered there are resistance, he will destroy them and whatever he has to do in order to destroy them. And so that will be very, I think Mao Zedong's mistake started from Gravity Forward. If you can say the anti-Rust campaign in 1957, but most important 1959, the Gravity Forward. Then all his political actions, the social education campaign, all cultural revolution was try to defend his mistakes. So Xi Jinping already made mistakes. The zero COVID is big mistake. And the U-turn is also another big mistake. Now, everything he's doing now is to try to avoid mentioning those mistakes and try to prove he can go beyond that. But what he tried to prove, in fact, that moving China further toward dangerous direction at this time, because it really, I don't think before this COVID mistakes, I thought he was a power hunger, but he at least could be a competent leader. But now I really don't think he is competent in his job now. You said that what he now all his mind is that how to stay in power, how to get rid of those who want to assassinate him. I mean, those purge in the security apparatus, they are so good example there. They talked about there are more than 300 assassination attempts in that several years against him. He went to Hong Kong, even did not want a day to stay overnight. He had to come back to Shenzhen that evening. He's so scared on this. When you are scared, the decision-making process could be really based upon paranoia. And it's so horrible, very horrible, as you said.
Seems to suffer from the same insecurity.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left. I wonder, but so Guogang, you can close it out for us.
Thank you. It's actually a quick question to follow colleagues' questions regarding rationality of Chinese foreign policy making. So generally, I agree with you. Your analysis is really right and insightful. But still, we can observe something. Maybe not so many cases, not very much flexibility, but still there is case of flexibility policy adjustment. A prominent case is China's Russian policy following Russian invasion to Ukraine. Before that, China advocated relationship with Russia without a limit. So after that, they changed the tone to say something about the bottom line policy. So we have a bottom line, but not really, as high as possible, no higher limit. So this kind of, I would say that there is a rationality for China's interest in terms of foreign relations. So my question is basically, so how can we interpret the mechanism behind this kind of policy adjustment? So that's basically solely Xi Jinping's, calculation, smart calculation of a situation. I think that's he doesn't want to give up his pro-Russia stance. He still wants to promote relationship, so-called without upper limit. But anyway, he has strategic adjustment. So why this kind of strategic adjustment happen? So what are those forces behind this kind of adjustment taking place? So bureaucratic rationality pushed him to do that, or his own calculation of international politics, or maybe some kind of a feedback mechanism within the policymaking process. Yeah, that's basically my question.
I really don't know if there is a clear feedback or maybe not clear, honest feedback system. And I would, because I don't know, I don't have internal information. My hunch is that the decision, you talk the so-called adjustments, is his instinct and his personal reactions to what he got information, which most time incomplete information he got. But also he has his own clear mind what he wants to do. He has such a personal passion over Russia. My generation, I don't know, he's 1 year older than me. We grew up to sing Russian song and watch Russian movies and read Russian novels, have such a personal attachment to Russia. I think that's his personal feeling about Russia. So he really likes.
Abroad, and he did not.
If I did not go abroad, I will be him. I'll be evil, equally evil.
You would not be. His personality does matter.
So that's what he has to know what he wants. He knows what he wants, but then he heard, maybe I should have a second thought. Then when he got opportunity, he went back. So at this time, he sent Wang Yi to Russia. At this time, he's going to Russia. It's totally disaster decisions, but that reflects his own thinking. Doesn't matter, it's the kind of bottom line or whatever. That's what I want to do. That's him. Disasters. Go to Russia at this time.
Well, thank you for a very rich discussion, one and all. And we very much thank you for coming to us and sharing your new book and talking to us about these extremely important issues. I want to alert everyone that on April 11th, our next talk, will be introduced to the China in the World Project, which is the first attempt to do a global survey of China's influence activities around the world. And we'll be getting a survey and a snapshot of various people's work on that in Latin America, in the Caucasus, and elsewhere. So please join us for that. And thank you again, Suisheng. It's been a pleasure.